I'll play the video first. Louis Giglio, maybe a name you know. He is in Atlanta. He was best friends with Andy Stanley, Charles Stanley's son. He's pastor at Passion City Church. They do a huge young adult conference every January called Passion. They fill up the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta, and they also do it elsewhere. So they get a lot of college students come up. It's kind of a neat thing, but he's also preaching. And what he's preaching through lately is Revelation. And what I want to show you is in his first week was an illustration he gave that I liked. So you might like it, you might not like it. It's up to you. But I thought I liked the emphasis it has. How's that? Good. So we're just going to watch it. Since it's early, this doesn't count as anything.
In 1999, Shelley and I had just been living in Atlanta for a few years, and it was one of those seasons where the Braves were just ruling like they are now. And it was just an epic time. In the playoffs, we had beaten the Houston Astros in one of the earlier rounds, and now we're in the National League Championship series with the New York Mets. And at that time, we hated the Mets. Probably too strong. We really hated the Mets at that time. They're not really necessarily our arch enemy now, but they were then. And so we're in this series. Braves are up. It's at Turner Field. I'm going all the way back to 99. I know this is a long time back in time. Anybody alive in 1999? Okay, just a few handful of people. Great, awesome. Braves playing down at Turner Field. We're sitting up behind the third base dugout. Game's going great because the Braves get a big lead. And it's game 6. We win. We're going to the World Series. We got a big lead. But the Mets come roaring back. I think it's top of the 7th. I think I got all my stuff here right. They score about 4 runs and tie the game. And so things are a little bit, get antsy. 8th inning, they come up, score a run, take the lead, 8-7. And during that time between the inning, between them batting and us batting, I take my Motorola flip phone out, and I know this is going to be complicated. Some of you just bear with me. And call our home answering machine to see if anyone's left us any messages while we've been out all day and most of the night. No one. No, I didn't think so. So we've got a minute. I've got I'm high tech, got my flip phone. I'm going to call home, take the answering machine back. I dial home, it goes in and you can hit the thing and get your messages. And when I go to get my messages, remember the Mets just went up 8-7. And things are getting dicey. It's in the 8th inning. Then to the 7th inning, Bob Costas, you remember that voice? He said it's 7-7 and we're hoping for a game 7. So now they're up. And I'm checking the home answering machine. And there's a message on it. It's Chris Tomlin, who lives in Houston, has season tickets to the Astros. We just killed him. So now he's all angsty. And he's watching this at his house in Houston, and he sees the Mets go up 8-7 and decides he'll call. So the message on the home answering machine goes like this. Hey, I know you can hear me. Anybody had a home answering machine, you know how this worked. Looks like things are getting interesting over there for the Braves. Louis, pick up. I know you don't want to, but pick up. Shelley, tell Louis to pick up the phone. I know you can hear me. And I'm just like, yeah, I thought, because I can't pick up. Voicemail. So bottom of the inning comes, Braves score. 8-8. 9th inning, nobody scores. Extra innings. 10th inning, Mets score 1 run. Braves come back, score 1 run. It is going off at Turner Field. 11th inning, Mets do not score. Bottom of the 11th inning, bases loaded. Andrew Jones at the plate, walk-off walk. And the Braves win the NLC. Yes, we are going to the World Series. I mean, the fireworks are going off. in the outfield. People are hugging people they don't know. I mean, it's pandemonium. Shelley can tell you, it is going off. It is so crazy. And I'm like, this is so incredible. Music is playing. It is pumping. It is loud. And I just open my phone and I dial Chris Tonic. Calling, connected. And I just hold up the phone. I've got the fireworks. I got the music. People are screaming. People are nuts. I'm going down the row behind me, just getting everybody's voice in the phone. And I'm like, yeah. And people see the phone coming, they're like, yeah. They don't even know who they're talking to, but people are going nuts. And I'm just getting all of this in there. And it is so incredible. And when I feel like it's appropriate, I just go, click. That was it. Oh, didn't call back that night. Didn't need to. Just need to know, hey, I know it looked iffy for a minute, but let you hear what it sounds like right now. And I'm telling you, God has given us an amazing, miraculous gift because he's taken John up into heaven. And all he's doing, honestly, is just holding the phone up for a minute. And he's saying, you got to hear this. You got to hear this. Do you hear that? And right when we're going, what was that? Who is that? I've never seen anything like that before. A little more clarity, please. A little more information. He goes, I just needed you to know that there is a sound. And there is a celebration. And I want you to hear it.
That's good stuff, babe.
I like that. I think Joyce, you came like he's preaching the book of Revelation. And he uses that illustration to say, this is what the book is like. I like what he said. I know it looked dicey for a while, but listen to it now. I think that encapsulates what I tried to say for a couple of weeks. And even when we talked about Revelation before, how I view that book. It's for our hope. It's for our comfort. Says, hey, just when you're asking for more information, God hangs up, right? We have some questions here, God. And what is he? He just wants you to know, I want you to hear the sound. And I want you to know there's a celebration. Like, that's what eschatology should be for us. That constant reminder, no matter how dicey, no matter how hard it is here, there's something better coming to comfort us. I wanted to spend the rest of our time tonight talking about 2 chapters of Scripture. You see on your notes what they are, Matthew 24 and 25. It's often called the Olivet Discourse. It's called the Olivet Discourse because Jesus gives it from the Mount of Olives, for what it's worth. And it is the most eschatological place where Jesus talks. It's also very apocalyptic as far as what he says. And it's the source of a lot of people who want to go there and say, what can we learn about the end times? What can we learn about what's coming? So I want to walk us through a few things, point out a few things with the understanding, as I've said for 2 weeks, there's 4 things that we can agree on. That Jesus is coming back, that there's going to be a judgment, that the bodies will be resurrected, there's going to be a judgment, and there'll be an eternal kingdom. But when we look at these chapters, people look at them differently. I'm going to point out a few things that I see in there, not to say you've got to look at it the way I do, but I think for me, when I saw these things, I went, that's interesting. Why didn't I notice that before? Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Well, if you leave here saying, I don't see it that way, that's fine. That's okay. You believe in Jesus is coming back. You believe you're going to be resurrected. You believe there's a judgment and kingdom. We're fine. You don't have to see it that way. I'm just telling you, this is something that jumps out at me. So, Olivet Discourse. Usually we jump in to verse 4. But what does the first two words of verse 4 say? If you have your Bibles open, you know, in the NIV it says, Jesus answered. What do you answer?
A question.
A question. So my first observation is if we're going to understand what Jesus answered, shouldn't we know what the question was? So he's asking, if he's answering in response to a question, right? So I'm going to back up and read beginning in verse 1. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? Jesus asked. Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. Now, if you back up to chapter 23, which we're not going to do because I don't think I'm going to get through 2 chapters, much less 3. It's the woes. It's not like the woes. W-O-E. Woe to you, Pharisees, like whitewashed tombs. At the very end, it's where Jesus laments over Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who you kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. Look, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Now that's a loaded phrase. Because if you back up to chapter 21, you know what you see? A bunch of people go out on the road because Jesus is coming in Jerusalem. And you know what they cry out? Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And then Jesus looks at the leaders and the temple and the city and says to them, woe to you, leaders, scribes, Pharisees, religious people, because you missed it. The kingdom of heaven is near and you ignored it. And so you're not going to get it until you see me coming. When's he going to come? And everybody's going to say, behold, he who comes in the name of the Lord. That's the second coming, right? That's later. And he's saying, you missed it. You've missed it. It's going to get bad. This place is going to be desolate. And then he tells his disciples, not one stone left on another. So this is negative prophecy, right? As prophets often are wont to do. And so his disciples, as Jesus is sitting on the Mount of Olives, here's the Olivet Discourse, his disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? What is this? No, I tell you, no, one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. When will this happen? Disciples had just said, look, it's a marvelous temple. And Jesus said, not one stone's left. And what do they want to know? When's this going to happen? It's unthinkable to them. This is the temple. This is the place of God. When is this going to happen? And they go on and say, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So Jesus, they've heard him lament. They've heard him cry out destruction on the leaders. They've heard him say the temple's going to be torn down. And they said, one day everybody's going to know I'm who I said I was when everybody says, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Right? Not that first time, but the second time. And so the disciples have these two events in their mind that are kind of connected. If the religious leaders and Jerusalem is going to be repudiated by the temple being torn down, and this kingdom that many people have put their faith in, the kingdom of Israel, no longer exists. Well, when is that going to happen? And then if that happens, then when are you going to set up your kingdom? Because if that kingdom's not going to last and the temple's going to wait, we want to know. So how many questions are they asking?
At least 2.
At least 2. There's 2 questions. All right. So here's my somewhat, I don't want to say controversial. You can read commentaries that say this isn't original with me. Here's my take on what happens next. From verses 4, when Jesus answers, through verse 35, Jesus is answering question number 1.
So
when will this happen?
4 to 35 is answering question number 1.
One of the reasons I say that is because of how Jesus ends that section when he says, truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. What things are we talking about? All the stones of the temple being torn down. When did that happen? 70 AD. A generation in biblical times is typically 40 years. So within a generation, that happened. The temple was torn down. Question number 1 was answered, right? And then notice what he says in verse 36, because then he answers the second question. But about that day or hour, which day? When is your coming and the end of the age? No one knows. Okay? And there's more in there. But those are the two things that I see are happening here. One reason I like that way of looking at it is because verse 34 has been the source of a lot of questions. Jesus says, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. We're 2,000 years later, almost 2,000 years later from the time he died and rose again or said these words. That's more than a generation. So some people say Jesus was mistaken. He didn't know what he was talking about. He misspoke. Is that a good view of having Jesus, the Son of God? That's problematic for me.
Yeah.
Other people have said, no, it's symbolic. It means, and it may be. That I can handle. Right? I can handle if there's something symbolic about this idea of a generation, because this is between verse 4 when he starts and verse 34 when he says that. There's a lot of symbolism that shows up. So I'm okay with that answer. But it seems to me, since something incredibly traumatic happened in 70 AD within a generation, it kind of makes sense to me that he could have, and since they asked the question, when is the temple going to be destroyed? That adds up to me. Just saying, that's how I view it. Now, if you read what's in there, there's some incredible language, very, very apocalyptic language. Many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah, will deceive many. Does that happen between 33 or so AD and 70 AD? Yeah, we could see that in history, right? It happens. There'll be wars and rumors of wars. Well, obviously, Rome is a war.
Yeah.
There's stuff that happens in that period of time. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom and kingdom. There'll be famines and earthquakes. I mean, by the way, these are things that you could pick any generation in world history and say, all of these things have happened. So here's the interesting thing about Hebrew prophetic language. It's really hard to figure out sometimes what they're talking about. I've used this analogy before. I think it's a good way. You go to the mountains sometimes. Like I think about, we sit in Tim and Janet's house and you look out their big windows in Murphy, North Carolina, and they go down a hill, and then there's a field, and then there's like a couple of peaks over there. And I swear, in a half an hour, I could be at the top of that peak, right? Or you go, like we drove through Scotland. You remember that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're driving up in these, and we come to this kind of low spot with an overlook, and you're looking around, and all around you are the highlands. And on the one hand, you've got the lower foothills, and then you get to the larger mountains, and you think they all look kind of close, right? Like, oh, I could probably be there in 30 minutes. Might be take me an hour or so to get to that big one over there, right? I mean, hiking. Our perspective sometimes is hard to tell. And the Hebrew prophets do this too, because they'll be I've used the phrase the already and the not yet. Sometimes they're talking about something more immediate. This is what's happening, but it also has a hint as something that happens later. And I think Jesus is doing this here. He's saying, yeah, these things that are going to happen between 30 and 70 AD, this generation, all of these things, they're also going to repeat and repeat and repeat, which is why throughout Christian history, people have said Jesus could come, because we look at these words at any time, right? So we have that dynamic. Those things you might not, people be persecuted, put to death, hated. Well, does that happen to the disciples? Yeah, it happened in that 40 years. At that time, many will turn away from the faith, betray and hate each other. False prophets will appear, increase of wickedness, love will grow cold. Then he says, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will reach the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then in the end, this is a hint. This he tells us the end, that's way out there. This has to happen. By the way, there are some mission organizations that this is their theme verse. They exist to try to bring Jesus back faster. The sooner we get the gospel to all the people, Jesus will come back, which is admirable, but a little self-serving, because that means a lot of people left out. But anyway, and then he goes in verse 15. So when you see standing in the holy place, the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. I think that's Matthew, like saying, you guys remember Daniel, right? He's kind of there. Does that happen in those 40 years? Now we know, a lot of people say, oh, one day the abomination will come. It happens. There's an arch. I forget what it's called. I think it's with Titus that has a picture of the Romans taking the furnishings out from the inner sanctum of the temple. Is that an abomination? The Romans go into that and take, so that can, you can tie that to those 40 years. Then he goes on and says some other things we get a little bit later. And then he says, pray that your flight will not take place in winter on the Sabbath, for then there will be a great distress, unequal from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. And we go, oh, it must be bad. Until you realize that phrase shows up about 12 times in the Hebrew prophets, in the Hebrew Bible. That idea that this is unprecedented, nothing like it'll have, for instance, on the positive. Josiah, the king, there's never been one like him before, and there will never be one like him again. And then Hezekiah comes along, and guess what it said about Hezekiah? There's never been one like him before, and this is what we call hyperbole in language, right? Like, you go fishing, anybody here go fishing? Catch a fish. It's the biggest fish ever. Especially a kid, like, they catch this. Like, it's the biggest fish ever, Mom. You wouldn't believe how huge my fish was, is it? And you're like, oh, I can't even fillet that bad boy. Sometimes, and so Jesus is acting in this section like a Hebrew prophet, which makes sense because he inspired the Hebrew prophets. He kind of knows the language. It's the language of the people. And so I could see, now it could point way in the future, because there will be a time when it's going to get really bad, right? We can talk about it. But it also is this kind of hyperbole, this exaggeration of language that can point there. And then he quotes a couple, we looked at Daniel, but then a little later he says in verse 29, immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Whoa, that sounds bad. But if you're looking at it, you notice it's got a footnote that tells you he's quoting Isaiah, particularly Isaiah chapter 13. If you go back to Isaiah 13, you see these languages, you know what Isaiah is talking about? The fall of the kingdom of Babylon. Why would he use this language? Well, because Babylon is the kingdom, the world ruler. Israel will know this, because at one point Babylon themselves went into the temple. And that's the initial abomination that Daniel would talk about that happened when they went in and destroyed the temple in 586 BC. But it wasn't long after that Babylon falls, like overnight. Happens, well, and of course, how do you describe something that upsets the whole world order? You describe it by saying the whole world order looks different. The sun is dark, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. It's symbolic in the one sense to say what's happening is cataclysmic. Everything we know about the world has been upset. When the temple is destroyed for the Israelites, do you think that's cataclysmic? Yeah. When the Twin Towers fell, we felt this way. Has the world changed? Yeah. For those first few months, we thought the world will never be the same again. It's not. It's changed, but there's been some. So often we use language like this to describe cataclysmic things. And I think part of what he's doing is he's saying, having said in chapter 23, woe to all these religious leaders. The other thing he's doing is making a very quick connection that Israel has now become Babylon. That's not good, right? No. You don't want to be Babylon. No. He's using, and Babylon shows up in John's revelation, right? It's the city, the prostitute Babylon, Babylon the Great, and all that. Babylon stands for the kingdoms of this world that prioritize the things of this world. And that would be typically military might and economic prosperity. Right? Those are the things. And in the ancient world, they controlled trade and economics, and they had the strongest military, and that made you an empire. And Israel, what did they want to be? An empire. Yep. And they thought God's blessing made them likely to be the best empire. And I think Jesus quoting Isaiah is saying, look, you've picked the wrong path. Because what does Jesus say? When someone smacks you on the cheek, what do? Go get your rifle and shoot them because they're just crossed you, and empire strength is what matters. Might is right. No, he doesn't say that at all. Jesus's kingdom is totally different than the kingdoms of the world. So military might, right? Is Jesus' kingdom at all about military might? No. How about economic prosperity? No, he's like, somebody takes your tunic, what do you do? Give it away. We'll get to some parables later, I promise. So I think this connection between Israel and Babylon is part of what Jesus is doing. You've put your faith, I could go back to, or I could go forward, and we see it enacted a few pages later when Pilate says, you have a choice. Here's Barabbas. What did Barabbas do? The word, a lot of translations use murderer. He was an insurrectionist, a murderer. He was trying to overthrow Rome. He was trying to establish Israel, reestablish Israel, and remove Roman dominion over them. And there's Jesus. And in many ways, Pilate offers Israel a glimpse into their heart of which kingdom they actually prefer. They prefer this kingdom or that kingdom. And they said, we want that one. By the way, just to really rattle the cage, who is the most economically and militarily powerful nation in the world right now?
China. No, it's America.
I think China economically might make the argument, but over the last 100 years, let's say, it would be us, right? We might want to be careful about where we put our priority in faith. Is that really the way of Jesus, that we think the most important thing is that we're the biggest military and have the most money? Just, it's an election year. Let he who has ears. And I'm not saying either candidate is standing for the way of Jesus, so please don't hear me say that. I'm saying that's what gives me pause.
Yeah, seriously.
And anyway, okay. Just say it for your particular.
Well, what was in the news today?
I don't know.
I'm telling you, it was the getting together of powers on the other side of Putin was getting together with the Korea.
Yeah, that's right. They made an agreement, tax money, tax vote, whatever.
Yeah, everybody, so.
But again,
And
the response to military aggression against Israel of Rome was fight back, says Barabbas. Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. And the people said, we'd rather have this. And that's the question that I think has been before Christians throughout history. Pick your kingdom. Pick carefully.
Yes.
Anyway. So that's the first. So I think as I read this, now, can there be things that we could say point forward? Yeah, all of these things can have an already and not yet. The other thing, by the way, that a lot of people point to is the Daniel thing. Where is that? Where you see him coming like the Son of Man in verse 30. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in the heaven, and all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And you see again, there's a footnote, Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14. So he's referencing one like the Son of Man coming on the clouds, right? And a lot of people say this is the rapture, the coming. But it's also possible, another way of looking at it, both. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, okay? If you read Daniel 7, before we get to the Son of Man, it's about these kingdoms of the earth. And they're fighting for control. The beast and the horns and all that, right? Horns, power. And then into that, one like the Son of Man appears on the clouds going into the presence of the Ancient of Days. So it's possible that the movement in Daniel of one like the Son of Man is from the destruction of the earth to the side of God in heaven. Possible, which would mean that could also potentially refer to his ascension, leaving the destruction and death and battle of earth over kingdoms and ascending to the side of the Ancient of Days. Possible. So if I'm gonna, so in my mind, I see how all of this leading up to verse 34, that one generation could potentially be the answer to question number one. When is this going to happen? When's the temple going to be destroyed? And then from there, he goes to question number 2. And what are the signs of your coming in the end of the age? Because he even says, but about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angel of heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. And then he says this. A lot of people look at this and say, oh, we're talking about the rapture here. No, we've talked about the rapture. And they usually go to verse 40. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, one will be taken and the other left. There we go, the rapture, right? Well, let's back up for a minute. What does it mean to be taken? We think, oh, because we have that rapture, to be taken away. But if you back up, what Jesus is saying is, it will be as in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up until the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them away. Who was taken away in the days of Noah?
Interesting.
The evil, the wicked, and only the good were left. And then he says, this is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. The 2 will be there. 1 will be taken, 1 will be left. Another translation for left, the word can also mean released. 1 will be taken, 1 will be left. We usually think taken is raptured, left is left behind. There's a whole series of books based upon that idea. But there are many commentators who make the point, in this context, those who are taken are the evil, and those who are left are those who have faith in Christ, who are left to see his kingdom come, his will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Good stuff, yeah.
So
That'll preach.
Yeah.
I'm kind of doing that now.
I know.
So again, I'm not saying I'm trying to upset your apple cart,
No, it's a good
but I'm saying in this, that's why I don't think this passage is a good one to say there's a rapture. At the coming of the Son of Man, they will be taken. Oh, that's the rapture. No, I think because the idea is 2 in the field and all of a sudden 1's gone. What do we do? No, the taken in the context, those taken away are the evil, the wicked. 1's left for the good. But I do think that's another reason I see this, and I think the coming, the second coming, if we went back to our graphs, is 1. It's not 2 events, it's a singular thing.
It just changed my mind. I want to be there.
Yeah.
And again, what did I say in the beginning? There are good and godly people who take a different view of that.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, when I look at this and I see it differently. I was taught this teaches the rapture. I look at it, I'm saying, I don't know that that's what that's saying in the context. I still think Jesus is coming, right? And so what Jesus says in answer to question, he says a lot about the answer to question number 1, right? He's actually, you go back to chapter 23, and he's kind of already hinting at things are going to get bad. And they say, isn't our temple great? And Jesus says, you're putting your faith in the wrong thing because it's coming tumbling down. They say, when is this going to happen, Jesus? He says, let me tell you. And when you think of it in that term, verses 4 through 35, Jesus is describing cataclysmic events that would have absolutely devastated and did devastate the people of Israel. And so it answers a key question, and it fits a timeline. The other reason I say that is because when we talk about, and I've said this several times in eschatology that focuses on timelines is misdirected eschatology.
Mm-hmm.
Because Jesus says, about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven or the Son, but only the Father. So his answer to what will be, when will this happen, or what will be the sign of your coming in the end of the age? It's like, nobody knows what's going to happen. It's going to be like the days of Noah. What are people doing in the days of Noah? Notice, we've got this cataclysmic language describing that first question. But when he gets to the second language, think about it. While we understand the story of Noah as God's judgment on the wickedness, that violence escalates from Cain killing Abel on up to Lamech boasting about his number of kills. When you read what Jesus is saying, he doesn't say, as in the days of Noah, there was great wickedness and God judged them. No, he says people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. Those are normal things. Eating and drinking is not in and of itself sinful. Marrying and giving in marriage is not in and of itself. It's just life. Life is happening. They were going about their business. And ultimately, I think the undercurrent is they were going about their business like nothing's going to change and life is going to go on. And God just left us here. We just got to make the most of it until Noah entered the ark and they realized in a hurry, we should have had our mind on different things.
It started raining.
We were focused on our own comfort, on our own things, on our own lives. And we should have been focused on other things, and the judgment came. And I think the same thing, even when it says 2 men will be in the field, what are they doing in the field? They're just working. It doesn't say, one man's in the field robbing a crop and the other man is working faithfully. It says just 2 men in the field, and 2 women will be grinding with a hand mill. So these are just regular, ordinary things. So in this section, Jesus doesn't use that kind of cataclysmic language. He's saying, no one knows. People are going to be going about their business, pretending like life will go on and God doesn't matter, and they're going to be surprised when it happens. And really, that's the tenor of what he says. So therefore, keep watch. He says it again, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. So what will be the sign of your coming in the end of the age? You don't know when it's going to happen, is the answer to that. I can't tell you. I don't know. Only the Father knows. No, Jesus is God. And he does know because he's 100% God. So don't hear me say like that. But in this moment, to his disciples, this is his point. And then from there, he tells a series basically of parables. He talks about verse 43, right after he says, keep watch because you don't know. He says, understand, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief would come in, he would not have kept watch. He would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you all also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come in an hour when you do not expect him. 3rd time in 8-10 verses, he said, you don't know, be ready, you don't know. And then he tells a story. He's like, listen, if you knew someone was breaking into your house at 11:30 at night, would you go to bed at 10? No, you would be awake.
Yeah.
You would probably have called the cops and say, listen, somebody said they're coming breaking my house at 11:30 tonight. Would you be here? Or you might take other precautions to make sure. What's that?
I make coffee.
You make coffee. You just welcome them and sit down.
I learned if you don't put fear in it, because it really happens.
But if you don't expect it, you just go about your business like nothing matters. And then you're surprised. And Jesus says, no, don't be like that. Keep watch. Then he tells another parable. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and said to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, an hour he is not aware of, and he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. What's the point of that story?
Keep doing right no matter what.
Don't give up hope. It's been a while since we've been told these promises, right? But he's coming. You won't know when. You won't be expecting it. But make sure when he comes, you're carrying out his business. The responsibilities he left you with, right? Well, first 2 parables, what's the emphasis? Be aware and stick at it in spite of everything. Then he tells.
But isn't that life in itself always? We're living in the kingdom. We know it's coming. Sooner or later, it's going to be flooded all over. But I'm still worrying about my business, and today I had electricians over to repair the electric. It's so hard to.
So in your analogy, you're talking about a very temporal thing that, okay, if a hurricane comes, whatever, if waters rise globally and flood the Keys and we're out of the house. But Jesus is talking cataclysmically. He's talking much bigger picture. And he's saying that if you knew tomorrow your house was going to flood, would you act today differently than you would if you didn't know? And the answer would be, yeah, if I knew a flood was coming tomorrow, I would do some things. Mm-hmm. I would do as much prep as I could and probably get out of Dodge. And Jesus is saying, live like it's happening tomorrow. Be ready whenever. Live like it's going to happen. It's coming, not the flood. And because you don't know when it's going to happen and you don't want to be caught by surprise. Then he tells a story of some virgins, 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. This is like culturally how the weddings work. The proposal, I don't know what you call it, the engagement, the endowment, what is it, the dowry would be paid, the agreement would be, marriage would be arranged, the bride would stay with her parents, the bridegroom would go prepare a place, and when it was time, he would come and receive his bride so that she may be where he is forever. John 14, by the way, marriage analogy. And so this happens in the middle of the night. The word comes, the groom has finished the house, it's time for the wedding. It's not like today. We send the save the date card 6 months in advance, and then the invitation with the RSVP and pick your dinner. It's like totally different back then. 5 of them were foolish, 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming. By the way, you see this as a theme? A long time. The master is away a long time. The master is away a long time. The bridegroom's away a long time before he comes. That seems to be significant, doesn't it? 2,000 years later, it's pretty significant. And the temptation, even in the New Testament, was people were like, gee, the message was already going around. Your hope is futile, that Jesus isn't coming back. Why are you following him? Already, within a couple decades. So 2,000 years later, does that happen in our world? Oh, that's a myth. That's history. Why do you believe that? Yeah, of course. So cry runs out. Here's the bridegroom. The virgins woke up. The ones that brought extra oil had lamps. They said, cool, let's go. And the ones that didn't have oil said, can we borrow some? They said, no, we won't have enough for us. So they have to go buy oil, but it's the middle of the night. And by the time they get oil and come back to the wedding, guess what? The door's already been locked and they don't get to come inside. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. So the guys ask, Jesus, how do we know the coming of your kingdom? And Jesus says, just keep watch, because you don't know. Parable after parable. Then he tells, this is the parable that when I read it, I'm like, I had no idea it was in this context. We call it the parable of the talents, right? Where a master gives 5 bags of gold and 2 bags of gold and 1 bag of gold, right? You know the story. This is where it shows up. Does that change your view of it at all? Because it sure does mine. Like, we take it out of the context that he's talking about what will be the end, what will be the sign of his coming in the end of the age. He tells this story. So what do you think this story is about? Is it about how you manage your money? Because that's what we're usually told.
Yeah.
Or we say talents, how you use your gifts for God, which is what we're usually told. And it has a bit to say about that, but really it's about a master who's entrusted his people with something, and he entrusts them differently according to their ability, right? He says, look, Patty, you have the ability to manage 5 bags of gold, but sorry, Janice, you can only handle 2. And Todd, you get 1. No offense.
I'll take it, no problem.
But that's not an offense, because if he would have given you 5, wouldn't have ended well. He knows you. The master knows his servants. And he says, I know what you're capable of. And I know according to your ability. So I'm going to give you according to your ability. I'm going to get, and he does that for all of us, right? And he goes away. Guess for how long? A long time. We don't know. Long time he's gone. Who knows how long he's gone? Just after a long time, he returned and he settled accounts with them. Jesus is coming again, right? This is about the return of Jesus. And the man who had received 5 bags of gold, he had earned 5 more. Master, you've entrusted me with 5. See, I've earned 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. That's pretty cool, right? See, a lot of times we read this like, if you manage your money well, God will give you more money. That's not what it means. That's not what it means at all. But that's what we say. So it's about the return of Jesus, right? And it's come and share your master. I will put you in charge of many things. What do the saints do in the eternal kingdom? We rule with him. He puts us in charge of many things, and we get to share the master's happiness, right? That's pretty cool. Like when we get there, that's what we get. It's the picture. Man with 2 bags comes in. He's made 2 more. The same answer. He's like, wow, you only earned 2? That guy earned 5. You should be ashamed of yourself. You know what? It's the best you could do. Look, I'll give you another 6 months to go earn 3 more. And if you do it, you're in. But if you don't, you're out. That's what he said. He says the same thing. You've been faithful to the little. I'm going to give you so much more. Come and share your master's happiness. This is a good man. How would you describe this master?
Kind, benevolent,
Kind, benevolent, generous. What?
No, wise.
Wise. So a lot of, is the master a good person or a bad person? It's good, right? Because he doesn't say to these people who have earned him money, if we look at it this way, you've earned me money, good. Now you need to go back and work harder.
Yeah.
He doesn't say that. He says, come share my happiness. That what you've earned for me, you get to enjoy with me. Right? That's pretty cool. Then we get to servant number 3, who's in charge of 1 bag of gold. And the man who had received 1 bag said, Master, listen to what he says. I know that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered food. So I was afraid and I went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. Question. Does this guy know the character of the master?
No.
He doesn't seem to know anything about the master. He sees the master and says, that is a demanding, harsh master. By the way, you know any people that look at God and say, that's a demanding, harsh God you worship. But what, I don't think he is. When you know him, he's not demanding and harsh. He's generous and gracious and kind and benevolent, all the things that we said, and wise. So this servant totally misunderstands his master. That might be important in what happens next, right? Because the message isn't, you didn't earn me any money, you need to go burn in hell. No, it's like, you don't know me. In fact, you say that you know me, but you didn't act like you even thought what you told me was real, because you're a lazy servant. If you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I did not scatter seed, why didn't you put the money on deposit at the bank and at least bring me back interest, so that when I returned, I would have received it? So take that bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is a parable about the second coming. Right? You can make a lot of applications. I could look here, by the way, and say, some people look at this and say that the issue with this last servant, why did he bury the money? Because he hoped the master would never come back. If I take the bag and take it to the bank, it's the master's money, and the bank will have record that it belongs to him. And even if he earns interest, I don't have anything to do with it. And why do I want to work for him? I don't know how long he's going to be gone. I'm just going to bury it. I'm going to look out for my own interest, because I think that guy is ridiculous and mean. So I'm not going to look out for his interest. I'm just going to bury it. And maybe if he never comes back, then I'll dig it up and it's mine. And nobody will ever know. He doesn't understand the master, right? I think another application, if we put it in the context of chapter 23 and a little bit of the first part of 24, which is about the nation of Israel, or particularly the religious leaders, have they been entrusted with a treasure?
Yeah, big time.
You are for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. You are my treasured possession, he tells them. And do you think at any point they said, let's just keep this for us? This is ours. Maybe the master will forget. This is about us. We're gonna look out for us. God sets aside a people, the Jews, for the purpose, yes, setting them aside, give them the law to mark them as different, tells them to eat this way and circumcise their males and act by these laws to say you're different than the world around you. Don't have idols, because they don't want you to worship me differently. He says, you're mine, you're my treasured possession, and you are a kingdom of priests. What do priests do? They represent the people before God, and they represent God to the people. And the nation of Israel was supposed to look at the people around them as a kingdom of priests and point them to God. And then, by the way they lived for God, represent God to the nations around them that were lost and doing all sorts of other things. And they chose not to. They chose Barabbas. We're back to that, right? And this parable might have something to say about that. Might have something to say about us. When we think that God has loved us and saved us and given us grace just for us. God, thank you for what you've done. I'm just going to keep this to myself because it's cool. And if you ever ask about it, I know the answer. I got it right here, God. And he's like, I know what that is. Why did you think that that's the kind of person I'm like and not this? Anyway, I could go on, but I'm running out of time. Last parable, the sheep and the goats, right? Sheep and goats. Sheep good, goats bad. What makes the difference? You remember this? This is the one. When did we see you naked or hungry or in jail? What does Jesus say?
When you did it to me.
Done it to the least of these. Done it to me. Do these people understand the master? Which kingdom are those people looking for? You know, poor people, they ask a lot. They require a lot. Come work in the office for a couple weeks. We'll let you meet some people that require a lot. And if you've ever helped someone that has needs, sometimes you wonder, are they ever going to stop asking? When is enough enough? By the way, you know what I love? That every time I ask for forgiveness, Jesus doesn't look at me and go, when are you going to stop asking? Isn't enough enough? Right? I mean, wouldn't that be something? You know, all of these things. When do you see a hungry, thirsty? When did you see a stranger and invite us in? When did you see us needing clothes? When did you see us sick? Now, this passage is used to do a lot of benevolence ministry, and all of those things are good, but benevolence ministry won't get you to heaven.
No.
I don't think this is about if you do good to people, that gets you to heaven. I think it means when we see the world through the eyes of the master that we've come to know, not the, harsh and demanding one, but the generous and gracious and benevolent, wise one, we act differently. We are a kingdom of priests. By the way, that applies to us too, because doesn't Peter say that we are now the kingdom of priests and a holy nation? And we are to represent God to the people and draw the people toward God. I think it applies, right? And so Jesus tells all these parables. And I wanted to do this because I think the point that I think all of these parables ultimately make is when we think about eschatology, the important thing isn't the timeline. It's not figuring out what this is and what that is and what that is. And is this that? And is now then? And is it tomorrow? Or are there 88 reasons why Jesus is going to come back in 88? And then 89 reasons why Jesus is going to come back in 89? Two legitimate, real books. I think eschatology for us, if I can go back to Louis, is God calling John up and say, John, hold up the phone and let them know what's happening up here so that they live down there as long as it takes, knowing this is coming. This is waiting for them. This makes all that worth it. I think that's what eschatology should do. Unfortunately, if I'm honest, most of what I hear and see taught and preached about Revelation and eschatology doesn't do that for me. It makes me want to go, ooh, is that the Antichrist? Makes me want to figure out, ooh, is that blood moon the right one? Ooh, what? It doesn't breed in me hope and comfort. It breeds in me fear and anxiety. And if you hear an eschatological message and you leave going, oh, I'm more afraid and more anxious about things, I think there should be a little flag waving and going, maybe that's not the best way to look at this. Maybe that's not what we want. But if you hear a message, says, I'm sorry life is hard. And I'm sorry you've suffered. And I'm sorry that you're going through this. But I haven't forgotten. And I'm with you. And even in that, you can serve me and you can represent me to the world. And one day, you're going to find out all of that was worth it. And it's going to happen just when you're going about your business, being the person that you are because of your faith, either in the good master or the harsh master, because that'll determine how we act. And when I come, which you don't know when, just you'll be ready. And it'll be good. And it'll be glorious. Okay, that's the end of mine. Whatever that was.
That was really good.
Yes.
Just, again, let me end by saying I could be wrong about some of it, about some of the particulars.
That's a good verse to vote.
But I think that last part, I'm exactly right. I
Yeah.
think those parables, I think those we can handle. We're talking about the how you interpret that first part. Maybe. Anyway,
You usually do have to take scripture into context. You said each of those parables by themselves are good parables as far as putting it in this context. It changes a lot of things. It's-
and that, I said it a lot over the last 96 weeks of these 3 sessions. More and more convinced we're too quick to grab a verse or pull verses out and not realize that it's connected to a passage and it's connected to lots of things that are important in helping us understand it. Now, again, you could take the parable of talents out and you could preach it without the context and you can make some good godly points. But when you add the context, I think it
But actually, you
adds.
never heard that, never had that story in this context.
I know, neither, honestly, until a few years ago, it never even occurred to me. I'm reading going, this is where that parable is? I didn't realize that parable was in this part of the story. Does that change how I look at it? Anyway, I'm done. I've said too much, as they say. So I will pray and we will go. It's not thundering, lightning, and raining.
No,
There's that.
We went to, pray.
By the way, I have no idea what we're doing next week, but we'll do something. How's that?
no, faith.
Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for the hope that we have in you. We thank you that you came and you lived and you died and you rose again, that you endured all that you endured. And yet you still, in spite of seeing up close and personal, not that you didn't know it already, human nature, and the evil that is in the heart of man, Lord, you still willingly laid down your life to redeem us. We're grateful for that. And we thank you that not only have you redeemed us, but you have called us to yourself to live a life as your kingdom of priests, to be the people who represent your kingdom on this earth in a way that represents you and your kingdom to the world and invites the world to come to know you. Because, Lord, we believe that you will return one day. And we might not know the day or the hour, but we have certainty that you're coming again. And that those who are dead will rise, that there will be a judgment, and that there is a waiting for those who know you and have received the gift of your salvation through Jesus, an eternal kingdom of a nature that we can't even truly imagine, that lasts forever. So, Father, help us, especially in the times that are difficult in this life, to hold on to that vision, to hear the phone that's held up in the heavens, to hear the joy and the celebration that awaits, to know That's our hope. That's our future. That's what you've provided for us. Pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.